Hi and welcome. I'm Steve Martirano, and this is the Behavioral Corner. You're invited to hang with us as we discuss the ways we live today, the choices we make, the things we do, and how they affect our health and well-being. So you're on the corner, the Behavioral Corner. Please hang around a while.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Behavioral Corner. It's me again. Imagine I get to hang around and wait for interesting people to show up so that we can talk about, what interests us, which is everything, because everything affects our behavioral health. So we hope you're finding us. If you are, let us know. Hit that subscription button. We love hearing from you as well. The Behavioral Corner. It's all made possible by our underwriting partners, Retreat Behavioral Health, about which more you'll hear a little bit later. We're rolling into February 2023, and as we have in the past, we pause to note Black History Month. We like to think that we present this show throughout the year with plenty of emphasis towards people of color and their unique situations regarding their behavioral health, because not all people have all the same kinds of problems. But it's February, and we note this very significant, now more than ever, moment of reflection, and that is Black History Month. Since, I guess, the Gerald Ford administration, it has been sort of federally acknowledged as a historical month devoted to the achievements and roles played by African Americans in our history. That's changing a little bit as well. We want to know what the people are thinking about when it comes to Black History Month. And so we reach out to a great friend of the program. Paul Brown has been with us in the past. I'll try to do his resume some justice here. He's an artist, he's a podcaster, he's an entrepreneur, and he's a mentor to many young people in his community. He's also a barber, and it's one of the great barbershops you're ever going to see. It is situated really at an incredibly important place when it comes to the African American history, and that's Germantown, a division, a section of the city of Philadelphia. And we'll tell you about Germantown's role in Black history, which is monumental. Mm-hmm. Paul, thanks for coming on Black History Month. It's great to see you again, buddy.
Definitely, Steve. It's great being on here, especially with a great mentor like yourself. And I'm always down for these amazing conversations.
Well, I told you when I talked on the telephone, that when we do stuff like this, we've gone to historians and academics, and they always shed a lot of light on history. I love history. Always loved history growing up. I don't think you can understand what's going on today unless you have some knowledge of what went on in the past. And so I've always been gravitated towards it. Black history is no exception here, and because I have a yawning gap in my knowledge of Black history, I really enjoy this month and this holiday. So I thought, let's talk to Paul. Paul's wired into this. And as I said, he has a barbershop. Barbershops have a unique place in the African American community. And Paul's place is unique all by itself. So Paul, what does it mean to you? What does this holiday mean to you, a young African American?
I feel like Black History Month, it makes me feel like an other again, in a sense that Black History Month, it should just be American history, and it should be taught along with history, right? As opposed to being separated in the shortest month of the year. And for the most part, Black History Month has been extremely whitewashed to a point where we only get nuggets of information that don't really tell the true story of what my ancestors did in this nation to make it stand up to its original values. I mean, we're still doing it.
Well, you know what? Whitewash is not only a figurative expression, but in this case, probably a literal one. And there are times when I look at Black History Month and I think, well, it's great for Netflix and the Turner Movie Classic, because they'll highlight films with African American actors in it, and that's good for them, I guess. And sometimes I think that this holiday wasn't originally intended, but has morphed into a kind of way to assuage white guilt. Well, we got a month. Let's all pay attention to African Americans. Do you feel that it's sort of drifted into that area?
Yeah, I feel like it has because information is cherry picked for a month, and it, again, is not taught to its fullest extent, and it doesn't really show. It doesn't really tell the youth the story of their fellow citizens. It really just eliminates a lot of information from our original story.
I know I was struck in reading about the history of it. I mean, by the way, there's nothing new about this effort. It's been going on since like 1915. They've tried to get, there was a Negro History Week, out of which came the month. So it's been a long, long effort. But I've always wondered what the African American take on the central notion of history, Black history, which was to highlight the achievement of African Americans, and not look at the struggle, because we know how it works. Everybody points to Oprah. Everybody points to Jay-Z. Look at look how look at that. Oh yeah, they are high achieving people, and they did it in the United States of America, no doubt about it. But this month, this Black History Month, is kind of unique in that every Black History Month has a theme. And as you know, this Black History Month, the theme is resistance. The effort to resist the hardship of being color in America. Don't you think is that the pivot that should have happened a long time ago?
To resist the struggle of being African American.
No, to resist the resistance. Let me see. I got to get the exact phrase. Black History Month's theme is Black resistance. In other words, the struggle to achieve instead of just focusing on the achievements.
You know what? I've just finished reading the 1619 Project. Right? And in that book is a really detailed history of all the many achievements that took place in the African American community. And I never even knew that public schools started because of my ancestors. Once they became free and got into politics, their main goal was to educate Black citizens. And then while doing so, they basically set up social programs, one of them being public schools. And that's why we have them. So not only did that reading that book showed me that a lot of the social programs that we have are because of my ancestors, and the fact that we still have them is a testament to their greatness. And to have to struggle and understand what you need as far as an education, just so you can basically free your mind, which ultimately means freeing your body. That's an accomplishment that I think isn't told widely. So I guess resistance. I'm not sure if I really fully understand that aspect of it, but for me, I would want this thing to be just to educate.
Yep. I mean, I get it. It's one of the reasons we like here. I mean, yes, there are, it's easy to point to the obvious categories of achievement, as limited as they're so obvious, it's sort of ridiculous to talk about them. And they are the arts and athletics. But you rarely find out about the achievements of people of color historically in the business world and in medicine, or the sciences. I mean, and that's, if that's what Black History Month is for all by itself, then it's terrific. Tell me about the 1619 Project, because it's interesting that you mention it. It was a presented by the New York Times and a bunch of historians they pulled together. It was a monumental job of scholarship, I thought, and journalism. And then it was greeted with a lot of controversy. You learned things from it that you didn't know. And do you think that was what most African Americans got out of it?
Yeah, well, in people even outside of the African American communities, it's just a wealth of information they never knew, and to learn about more in detail about Frederick Douglass and his role, and basically getting Buffalo Soldiers, convincing like Abraham Lincoln to assign a Black regiment to help with the Civil War was a big deal. And to learn that nothing was given to Black people. They had to fight for every inkling of freedom that they ever achieved, and to see where we are at this very moment, we're still fighting for it. And just pages upon pages of detail related to history in the Black community was just mentally rewarding. And I just really wish that more people knew about that history.
Yeah, I waded my way through it as well. As I said, it's a monumental achievement. Greeted by a lot of controversy, which shouldn't surprise us. At this moment in time, Black History and Black History Month is more important than ever, in my view, because once again, or perhaps it's just a continuation of a process, there are folks who would like us not to pay much attention to African American history.
Yeah.
How do you feel? I mean, I'm talking about specifically about politicians that run trying to stop Black history studies. It's African American studies in school. It's incredible. That effort is ongoing and has been going on for a very long time. How do you view that? What are they afraid of?
It's interesting. I remember being in the fourth grade when it's around Thanksgiving, and my teacher, Mrs. Meisinger, she blackboard filled with just what was taking place during that time. And of course, she goes through the Pilgrims and she goes through the relationship with the natives. And then she fast forwards to basically the slaves being enslaved, then they were freed. And it was basically, Black people were basically two sentences on her blackboard. So I remember raising my hand. I asked, like, how come you aren't teaching us anything about Black people other than the fact that we were just slaves? And she cut her eyes at me and she said, where would you be if it wasn't for slavery? So now, still remembering that.
It's amazing. It's an amazing comment.
It's an amazing comment, right?
In other words, in her view, you and your ancestors don't get to benefit from having been brought over here.
In her view, she basically, from my interpretation of it, was that slavery civilized Blacks in America. That was basically her interpretation, right? That's what I gathered from it. And now, as a 40-year-old man and reading and also teaching my children, there's a great book called The Debt by Randall Robinson. And he basically goes to Africa. He's a Harvard graduate who has just verifiable history of what Black people were doing in Africa prior to slavery. And knowing that Blacks were being stolen from Africa since the 1300s. By the 1700s, Johann Freeman Blumenbach and Carl von Linnaeus came up with the concept of white supremacy. Black people, so many Blacks were stolen from Africa that it was literally unsustainable. But prior to that, they built the pyramids. Then if you go to Kemet, which is modern day Sudan, there's about 20 different pyramids. And then you see various different Black empires who were also goldsmiths, and you start to learn who your people are before slavery, and then you learn about slavery, and there were never people just taking it. There was people always fighting. They were always fighting for their freedom. And then not only did they achieve their freedom by actually fighting in a civil war, but then pushing this nation to actually be more humane to everyone.
Yeah, that's a deep insight, and I think if there's a criticism of anything that's going on with regard to raising awareness of Black history, it's that it almost begins from the premise that it's a given they were slaves, and now we're going to correct the record and let you know what happened. No, I mean, it wasn't a given. It wasn't. It was wrong from the jump. It didn't become wrong when when the Declaration of Independence was written, and for the first time said all men are created equal. People had said before that, this is wrong. So there's that given sense of, well, all right, they're slaves. You're like your teacher. Well, you were slaves. What do you expect? I don't think they expected to be slaves. Paul Brown is our guest. In addition to the many things he does, as I said, his business is in Germantown. Germantown, if for those of you who don't know, is in the northwest corner of the city of Philadelphia. Philadelphia, I don't have to tell you, is not only the birthplace of this democracy. It was once the capital, and it is also now home of the best football team on the planet. But that's another story. Germantown, as I said, sits in the northwest corner of the city and is ground zero for the anti-slavery movement that exists in this country and now the world. There's so many things in. How do you? By the way, how did you wind up in Germantown? Is that where you wanted to be, or how'd you get there?
Well, growing up, my family first. I was born in Hunting Park. My mother later on moved to Logan, and then we moved to the suburbs, which is Elkins Park, Glenside. Then we had to move back to the city when we ended up in Germantown or Mount Airy. We're really kind of right on the border of Germantown. So we ended up right in Mount Airy, and for the most part, majority of my childhood was spent in Mount Airy. And that's basically how we got here. My first job ever was in Chestnut Hill. I would walk to work damn near every day just to just to stay in shape. And as a kid, so that's where it started.
You have young children? Are they? Do they gain from the experience of West Mount Airy and the Germantown area? As I said, are multiracial, have been like that for years. They have deep roots in American history and Black history. It's an extraordinary place to raise children. It's the Quaker experience here is what's remarkable. I know you're aware of this, but I'll just mention it. The first document ever written in this country stating that slavery was wrong was in 1680 something by 4 Quakers who just woke up one day and said, "This is wrong," and then that got erased. This idea of erasure is scary, and it's going on right now.
Right.
How important do you think it is to make sure that doesn't continue?
It's imperative that my children have the benefit of not only experience Mount Airy, but they go to Canada every summer. So in Toronto, their experience is the most multicultural city in the world. So they get exposed to various different cultures, and it was interesting. I remember telling my daughters about how horrible it is that our ancestors the young people are robbed of the memory of themselves, in the sense that I remember in Canada had everyone asks you, "Where are you from?" And I would always say, I'm from America. And they would keep asking me, drilling down, "But where are you from, though?"
Right.
And I would keep telling them I'm from America. So remember, Canada is the most multicultural city in the world. So everyone usually identifies with the country that has a culture, and they have a culture associated with it. Like if you're Filipino, there's food associated with it, and that's your culture. So I had to explain to them that I was basically robbed of knowing what country we come from Africa, because my ancestors were kidnapped and were made to be slaves. And people hearing this were saying, that is absolutely horrible. It is horrible that you don't know what country you come from. That should be a crime against humanity. So hearing that, for me, I make it my job to teach my children Black history, detailed Black history year round.
When you say detailed Black history, what do you mean by that, detailed Black history?
Meaning, when I pick up books, it's books that tell the story of, again, where we were before slavery, so that my children can understand why Blacks are so resilient, right? And to actually, for them to understand what it had to take for Africans to be taken from the Middle Passage. I mean, taken from Africa and survive the Middle Passage to get here, and to go through all that trauma for me to actually be here in this nation right now is testament to how strong my ancestors were. And so I basically go through various books and try to give them as much detail as I possibly can to make sure that I am honoring the shoulders that I'm standing on.
Yeah. You said this a couple of times now, and I think I understand you, and I absolutely agree that with regard to Black History Month, or any effort to look at the history of people of color, it is not enough just to point out the successes, the achievements that have been made. You've got to look at before that, because as I said, the sense that it was a given that people should be enslaved, I guess it makes for a better story, right? Oh, look, well, we couldn't help they were going to be slaves no matter what, but look how far they've come under our system. That's what's wrong with this, right? It doesn't. Yeah. That's what's missing. That story before.
Right. And when you know about the story before, then it gives you a whole different sense of identity, and it gives you a whole different sense of self, and a whole different sense of resilience. And
yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. It eliminates this notion that there was an inevitability to slavery.
I mean, we can always, because it's going to be people who will say, well, Romans had slaves, or slaves has always been around in every society. Why would the slavery of Blacks be any different? And when there's a great book called The History of White People by Neil Painter, and I recommend anyone read it, so that people understand that Europeans for a long period of time were slaves. But it wasn't the same type of slavery that Blacks were subjected to. They didn't basically try to brainwash you of knowing where you came from. There wasn't an aspect of that to make you subhuman. That wasn't there. You lost the war, therefore you were required to help build this new society. Now, when Johann Freeman Blumenbach, Karl von Linnaeus came up with white supremacy, and these guys literally, their education systems were horrible. All they did was basically say that we don't find Black people to be attractive, therefore they are not human. And this is like Karl von Linnaeus, he's classified everything, right?
Yep.
So he was classifying humans, and that's where this notion comes from. So because he viewed Caucasians to be more beautiful than any other society, therefore they can't be slaves. It is like literally his assessment wasn't based on any scientific evidence at all. And then, here we are.
Yeah, again, it is, the more you bore down and get past I hate to say that, Frederick Douglass is a towering figure in the history of the country and people of color. But to sort of centralize it all on his achievement and what he did is to miss your point that, well, how did it happen? How was it so easily accomplished that people should be thought of as subhuman and doing what's natural? They're supposed to be slaves. And I knew if I talked to a fellow like you, not a fellow like you, I knew if I talked to you, we'd get right to this, because as a white guy, I mean, I really don't have the position to point out, I think a lot of this is bullshit here. We're not really talking about what's going on. So I'm so glad to have you discuss this. Yeah, they pivoted and they went. We got to justify this somehow. So let's point out to everybody and teach for centuries that they're inferior.
Mm-hmm.
They're not the same as us,
Mm-hmm.
and they got away with that for a long time. And they got away with that for far too long. Let me share something with you. I just saw it. I was looking at a French film last night.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of those new wave movies and Jean-Luc Godard and all of that new wave stuff. I know you're familiar with this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what a Shirley card is?
No.
I'll tell you what a Shirley card is because I didn't either. Godard, when he did most of his work in black and white, when Kodak came out with a new color film and he examined it, he denounced it as racist film.
Mm-hmm.
And he did so because Shirley cards are color cards that somebody like Kodak or anybody else who manufactures cameras or anything use to scale colors.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, this is the proper color for this situation. And there was nothing for people of color on the scale. It was white oriented. And Godard was among the first people to go, we can't photograph people based upon this color scheme. It eliminates people of color. And I thought, that's how deeply it went. What you're just talking about. That's how deeply it went. That they thought light skin was the natural color and no other skin color needed to be considered when they manufactured this film. So, so if Black History Month can teach us that stuff, then I think it'll do a real benefit. Paul, are you at all? I know half of the answer to this. I mean, it's Black History Month, and we're going to go into the Super Bowl. As trivial as football may seem in this context, it is the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. And we will have two quarterbacks, two people of color playing quarterback against each other in the Super Bowl. First time ever for that game in that position. Should African Americans take pride in that, or is that just show business?
I think African Americans should look at the lack of opportunity that African American quarterbacks were given, and look at how Black quarterbacks definitely changed the game of football in the sense that now, if you don't have quarterbacks who are dynamic like a Patrick Mahomes or Jalen Hurts or a Lamar Jackson, I mean, for Michael Vick, you probably won't really win that many games anymore. I mean, and you could put Burrow in the same class because these are running quarterbacks. And when you look at the football for a long time, there was a lot of racism associated with it where they thought that Blacks didn't even have the intelligence to play the quarterback position.
Yep. Not
only can they play the quarterback position, they go above and beyond the Call of Duty when given the opportunity.
Well, so I've had a theory about this that goes along those lines. Obviously, that you used to be able to hear it. Well, they're not suited for the position. When in fact it was, you tell me what you think of this. Look, historically, quarterbacks didn't have to be athletes. Mm-hmm. They didn't have to be athletes. They just had to be able to throw the football. That's all they had to do. Okay. So why would you waste the position on an African American who was always a way better athlete? You couldn't have your best athlete playing a position where you didn't need to be athletic. So you made up some phony baloney story about he's not smart enough to do it. I want him to play, over here. But then after a while, it became apparent that you couldn't afford to do that anymore. That first of all, the guys you just mentioned, they are the best athletes on the team. And I'll never forget how phony baloney that intelligence thing was. Terry Bradshaw used to hear that all the time. Mm. He can't spell cat.
Mm.
He may be able to sling the ball and all that, but he's just a dumb white hick.
Mm.
And he said, "How smart you got to be to play football?" And I thought, yeah, that's good. That's great. Well, I hear you about you. See, this is what they'll tell us. That's a storyline now. 2 African-American quarterbacks for the first time. And we're automatically supposed to forget the 100 years when they couldn't get a shot.
Right. Or look at outside of sports. That same theme can be seen in every corporate American structure. It can be seen in most businesses. And we can see it with the police and how they treat Black folks in general. Like, it's just that's always going to be there. There's a lack of opportunity left and right, and it's because we don't have the ability to assimilate.
The ability or the opportunity?
Well, the ability. I can't really suppose my skin color prevents me from assimilating. Period. Like, I'm gonna be Black before I'm anything else.
In any context.
Right. And for that reason alone, you are going to have to be excellent to get the opportunity. Excellent. And to maintain the opportunity, you're going to have to be excellent. And so when we see like how you mentioned earlier, the Black History Month, they'll highlight certain achievements. Well, Oprah did it. How come the rest of them can't do it?
Yep.
Well, if Jay-Z did it, how come the rest of them can't do it? Because just like if you go throughout history, the rest of them have been subject to systematic, concentrated poverty that continues. And now, even more so than when Frederick Douglass had to educate himself to free himself, you have literally people like DeSantis literally throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, and attacking the education system.
Paul Brown, thanks for joining us. Tell me if I'm wrong in this. I hear you saying that Black History Month will have achieved its goal when it no longer is a separate month. It's just part of American history.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And unfortunately, African Americans have been robbed the opportunity to really tell their story. Like, when we learn about Holocaust year round, like if you go to History Channel, you can learn about the Holocaust, and that story is told, and it needs to be told so that we understand why we sacrifice so much to liberate people from tyranny and oppression. But they take out of that story the same people from America who were already being oppressed went to fight and liberate people who were being oppressed. Right? That story is never told and is eliminated. So we don't even get to tell how much African Americans really did, not only what really did to, again, make America stand true to its original set of values, all men are created equal, but to also liberate folks who aren't in our community and then try to liberate ourselves while fighting for others. We don't get the opportunity to tell that story year round.
Yeah. Black History Month notwithstanding. Paul Brown, I'm telling you, if you guys are in the Germantown area, first of all, it's hard to get an appointment at Paul's shop, because I do believe that you've got to be at least well-read before Paul will cut your hair. Thanks, buddy. It's always a pleasure. Enjoy the football game. We're both Eagle fans, unabashed. Mm-hmm. And I'm a big fan of his podcast, which is called It's Always Positive. Is that it? Positive in Philadelphia?
It's Always Personal in Philadelphia.
Personal. I was a guest on the show. It's lively. It'll plug you into a community that maybe you don't know enough about. Really well done. Congratulations to that. Thanks. Love that. You got an open invitation to join us on the Behavioral Corner.
Hey, Steve, for sure. And also, before we get off, one thing for sure, I was reading to my daughters today, and we were reading about what took place before slavery, all the amazing accomplishments that Blacks were achieving. And prime example, my wife's an eye doctor. when I picked up the deck and I read the book, I learned that in Timbuktu, Africans were already doing cataract surgery in the 1300s. All right, cool. So then we learned about the Portuguese were the first to actually start stealing blacks because they're the only ones who knew how to build civilization. So instead of going to school to learn, they started stealing the people. Cool. So we get to that point. And we start learning more detail about the slave trade. And my daughter, Alicia, she says, I said, well, what did you take away from what I just read to you? She says, I hate white people.
No.
So I said, that's not why I'm reading you this. And we don't hate anyone. We don't hate white people. That's not the reason for this story, because there were a lot of white allies, and there still continues to be a lot of white allies out there who continually try to push for equality for all. This story, what I'm teaching you here, is for you to understand why your community looks the way it does and why you're so resilient, because we're still here. And I think it's really important for your audience to understand that African Americans trying to love themselves does not mean that they hate you. They're just really trying to educate and learn more about themselves who will have the opportunity to do so. That was basically it.
Yeah, well put, my friend. Well put. Thanks for joining us. Black History Month. Read up on it. But if you're from the Philadelphia area and you don't know the history of this area with regard to anti-slavery alone, bone up. It's a fascinating story. Paul Brown, thank you, buddy. Check out his podcast. It's really good. We'll have a link to it on our site. And don't forget, like us, follow us, subscribe to the Behavioral Corner. Take care, everybody. See you next time. Bye-bye.
See you, Steve. Go Birds.
Retreat Behavioral Health has proudly been serving the community for over 10 years. Here at Retreat, we believe in the power of connection and quality care. We offer comprehensive, holistic, and compassionate treatment from industry-leading experts. Call 855-802-6600 or visit us at www.retreatbehavioralhealth.com to begin your journey today.
That's it for now. And make us a habit, hanging out at the Behavioral Corner. And when we're not hanging, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter on the Behavioral Corner.